There's lots of news and rumors to discuss in today's video, including some significant potential goaltender movement in the offseason. Today we're looking at some trade rumors involving goaltenders like Jacob Markstrom, Jordan Binnington, and UC Saros in Nashville. They could all be potentially on the move. We'll discuss the latest on them. Is there a chance Sidney Crosby may ask out after, of course, the Penguins not quite living up to expectations? Even though they're in the midst of a playoff push, they're still not, I think, where they envisioned themselves to be. There's an article from the New York Post examining that possibility. Plus, we have some other updates as well, including a potential resistance to the Arizona Coyotes' plan to build their new arena. The first, batch of negativity towards that has come out. We'll discuss a little bit about that. Plus, we have lots of other news around the league, including some signings, injury updates, and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. Let's kick things off first, though, with a little bit of history. Apparently, goaltender Freddie Andersen of the Carolina Hurricanes has get himself into the history books. Freddie Andersen has recorded the highest number of wins in NHL history during the goaltender's first 500 NHL appearances. He has a record of 294, 127, and 52 now after making over 500 NHL appearances, and that's the most. So clearly that's a phenomenal result. Of course, he missed an extended time earlier this year dealing with some blood clot issues, and since he's been back, he's been absolutely lights out. He has been the best goaltender, arguably, in the NHL. In the past, I'm not sure how many games we're looking at here, but really, it's an extended time now. The last probably 4 to 6 weeks for sure. So certainly, Carolina's loving that idea going into the home stretch of the regular season and into the playoffs here. So Freddie Andersen's in fine form, and I certainly hope that will continue. As I mentioned, we're going to do another video separately from this talking about NHL expansion and relocation. There is some other news there, but I want to do a kind of its own separate video for it because there's a lot that came out today. But just to give you a tidbit of what we're going to be discussing, there was an article today, some comments from the mayor of Scottsdale. Now, of course, keep in mind the Coyotes' plans here to build are technically in Phoenix, not in Scottsdale, but it's basically, from my understanding, it's really, really close to the to Scottsdale limits here. So essentially, there's some major resistance coming from the Scottsdale mayor. So we will see. He doesn't think that they should be pursuing this project. So we'll obviously take a look at that in further detail. There's also been some talk today about potential NHL owners. Kevin Weeks was reporting that some owners from groups representing Atlanta and Houston both meeting with Gary Bettman. And the ownership group in Salt Lake City that wants to bring a team there, the Ryan Smith group, Ryan Smith on his social media today has a poll up saying, if we were bringing an NHL team one day to Salt Lake City, what should we name it? You never see that. Like, you don't talk about a name until there's a franchise. So the timing of it just seems, a little bit interesting. So I need some more research that I need to do on the Houston front, on the Atlanta front, on the Salt Lake City front, and more of the content here regarding the resistance of the Coyotes project. I don't know if the ones that are resisting and complaining, if it can really lead to anything or not. So I have some more digging I got to do, and I'm going to do a separate video. Look for that either later tonight or into tomorrow morning sometime once that is done and ready. But certainly some news on that front. The Coyotes have their first set of resistance, and like I said, I need to find out how much of an impact that could possibly have. So stay tuned for more information coming soon on that front. The Western Hockey League in the CHL today finally confirmed the reports that we talked about a week or two ago, that they have their next exceptional status player, and that's 14-year-old Landon Dupont. He'll be 15 by the time next season starts. So Landon Dupont, of course, got exceptional status. He's going to be the second in WHL history, behind Connor Bedard being the first. We've seen in other leagues, more commonly in the OHL, we've seen lots of other names get that exceptional status there, like John Tavares, We had Aaron Ekblad had that status. A couple of guys that didn't work out so much, like Sean Day. Joe Velino got that status in the Quebec League. Also, he still ended up being a first-round pick. He's an NHL player, but hard, not to the level that people expected when he was, 14, 15 years old. And there's been some others. Shane Wright had that status in the OHL as well. So certainly, most of these players that have had the status have gone on to be very high draft picks, in some cases franchise-altering players. So we'll see what Dupont can do. Obviously, he's got a ways to go before he can be drafted to the NHL. His dad was a hockey player as well, Mickey Dupont. He played pro hockey throughout the NHL, AHL, and a fair bit in Europe too. Didn't play a ton in the NHL. Played with like 2 or 3 different teams. Was mostly a minor leaguer. Played in Europe. Obviously, son Landon looks like he's got a lot more talent than his dad did, at least able to rise to a higher level. So obviously he comes from a hockey family, and Dupont looks phenomenal. The reports on him just scream special player. I don't personally know a lot about him, but from what I've been reading, everybody that does has nothing but phenomenal things to say. So keep that name in mind, Landon Dupont. You'll probably be hearing a lot about him as being a future first overall pick. I don't know if he'll make it there. I hope he does. He has the potential to be. Like I said, Canada's been able to produce a lot of top talent here. Of course, going first overall, or at least projecting to be here in recent years, of course, between Bedard. Before him, I know Wright didn't go first overall, but he was projected that way. We got Celebrini coming up. And then Bedard has a cousin who's a couple of years behind him that has potential as well. And then now we got Dupont as well. So lots of Canadian talent coming in that front. We just need some more all-star goaltending. It's something that we haven't had in a while, since we had the era, of course, of Price, and before him we had Brodeur, Waugh, Fleury, of course, was in that mix, for a while, being one of those elite goaltenders too. But it's been a while since Canada's produced an elite level goaltender. They seem to be mostly all coming from Europe and a handful from the U.S. So that's something Canada needs to examine, how they're developing those types of players. Some other news around the league: the Flyers have signed European free agent Oscar Eklund. He gets a 1-year ELC, $950,000, undrafted forward from the SHL. So he'll have an opportunity to join the Flyers and see if he can have an NHL impact and have an NHL future. A few other quick roster moves as well. The Washington Capitals today recalled defenseman Lucas Johansson from the AHL. The Red Wings are sending Ville Husso down to the American Hockey League on a conditioning stint. Of course, he hasn't played since I think it was mid-December. They technically, I don't believe, even have him on IR or LTIR, but he has been battling a lower body injury and has been their third goaltender. Kind of almost, I wouldn't say he's forgotten, but but they've been running with Lyon and Reimer for some time here. So we'll see if Husso can get back in the mix. In Calgary, have also recalled defenseman Ilya Solyov as well from the American Hockey League too. Now, as I mentioned in the rumor section, we've got a variety of things to talk about. A lot of it's around goaltending. Before we get into goaltending, let's start with the Crosby question, you could say. This article comes from the New York Post and Larry Brooks. Not really having any intel suggesting that Sidney Crosby wants to leave Pittsburgh. Of course, his Penguins have been on a pretty great surge here to get back in the mix, and they very well could find themselves in the playoffs when it's all said and done. They're right where they need to be in the mix. But like I said, they're in a battle here with the Islanders, the Red Wings, the Capitals. So only 2 out of those 4 teams are likely going to get in here. So clearly they've got work to do. No guarantees. They could fall short, but things are looking promising for Sid and the Pens right now after a so-so underperforming season, late season surge here. And this article kind of goes over the possibility that, kind of just talking that, even though the Penguins are making a late season surge, there's still lots of concerns over, even if they get in, are they going to be able to do any damage? Are they going to be a first round exit? Is this team really able to contend? And then kind of examining how a lot of other top elite superstar talents over the course of their careers ended up leaving their franchises that they were with for all those years, for whether it be a half season, 1 season, or more, to kind of chase more greatness elsewhere before they wrap up their careers. And he lists plenty of examples of that. Now, there's some players that choose to ride it out with their one team, and he could be one of those guys. Now, Brooks does go on to say essentially that he wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh does re-sign Crosby and he ends up signing, a few more years and sticking it out. But at the same time, just kind of said, looking at lots of other great examples to suggest that should be far from a slam dunk. And if Crosby really wants to continue to pursue greatness, pursue Stanley Cups, and pursue playoffs consistently, that he may have to do it elsewhere. It's hard to say, right? We'll see how the last number of games go here for Pittsburgh and what happens next. At this point, I think if Crosby decided he wanted out, I would be surprised, because he seems to be that loyal guy that wants to make it work there. And of course, like I said, his buddies Malkin and Letang both signed extensions. If he doesn't do it too, I just don't see him being that guy. As much as I do see Larry Brooks's points, they're well made. I don't think we can say it's a slam dunk. But at this point, I think we'd all be shocked if Sid says, I want out, trade me, and I'm going to sign somewhere else once my contract's up or whatever. So could he get moved? It's maybe. I'm not sure that he's going to be asking for it, though. It would be quite surprising. Another name to look for in the list of Columbus Blue Jackets that are going to be made available this offseason is defenseman Ivan Provorov. CBJ beat writers are reporting that Provorov exactly hasn't been considered a great fit. Of course, he already had some salary retained on his contract when they acquired him last offseason. We know that they haven't had a good year. Many things have gone wrong for them this year, and they're definitely going to be, I don't know if we want to call it retooling. I mean, they're still in a rebuild, I think it's fair to say. But even amongst what they have there, I think, looking at some of the older players, whether it be Provorov and other names that we've talked about, is like, does it even make sense for Johnny Gaudreau to be there? It probably doesn't, but they've given him all the control in his contract, and if he doesn't want to leave, then they can't really do anything about it. Patrick Laine makes sense for a fresh start, but can they even do that with his contract? Probably not. So that's tricky. That's challenging. They have some other names out there too that you can look at. But when it comes to Provorov, he might be attractive, given what he's got on his leftover term on his contract with salary already retained. Maybe Columbus is willing to eat a little bit more. Can that be more appetizing? So look for another veteran defenseman to be potentially on the move if they can figure things out. As I mentioned, the goaltending market getting a little crazy. Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick talked on the 32 Thoughts podcast that came out today about Jordan Binnington in St. Louis. Friedman goes on to talk about the Blues and how, of course, they didn't meet expectations. The fact that they were swept in their season series by the San Jose Sharks, I mean, you just can't expect to be a playoff team and lose to the conference's worst club. It's just not something you can do. I mean, to lose one game, sure, okay. It happens to the best teams that have an off night, but, at the end of the day, to lose 3 games to a club that's considered that weak and that low in the standings just isn't acceptable, and this is not something you can have happen if you're expecting to be in the mix, right? It's just that simple. So clearly the team, has enough players signed with enough term and enough no-move clauses that they're certainly not going to be entering a rebuild. I don't think we can say that. They have some good prospects coming too. St. Louis, if they can get things done properly here, if they can move out and make room for some of these younger players to kind of retool, I don't even know that they need to do a ton. They can move some players and kind of shake things up a little bit and then try to work in some of their youth, because like I said, some of their prospects are pretty darn good. They have some really good prospects coming. You got a couple of young players already there, like Neighbors is having a phenomenal season. Thomas and Kyrou, if they can lead this team, they're still fairly young. I do wonder about Kyrou as well. He hasn't had the greatest year and does get criticized a lot. And I wonder if they would consider that. But Jordan Binnington was brought up by Elliot Friedman saying that, he's one of the bright spots on the team this year. And he wonders if... where he does have some trade protection in his contract, if Doug Armstrong would talk to him and try to consider making a move there. Because they do have Hofer, there as well. They have some more goaltending prospects coming up behind him that they could, take the chance here to kind of pass the reins, if you will. And obviously Binnington, you can make it, if you look at when they won the Stanley Cup, up until now, for the most part, his numbers have declined, except for this year, they seem to kind of bounce back a bit. So obviously, if you're going to get something of value, you need to give something of value. And it would be a way for them to kind of, I guess you could say kind of expedite a retool in moving a familiar face that has value, that lots of teams are looking for goaltending help. Maybe they can get some other players, whether it be prospects, other forwards, defense, like some package that would help kind of retool this roster a bit. And, Binnington's got a bit of term on his contract, a bit of money. I don't know if they can look at retaining or not. It's not something you see often on the St. Louis, especially with contracts with term. We know they want to move a defenseman as well, at least to shake things up back there between Falk, Krug, etc. One of those guys likely has to go. They tried to move Krug last year. He blocked the trade because they've kind of painted themselves into a picture here that they can't get out of because of all the no trades. But Binnington is a very interesting name, and if Friedman's bringing him up as a I wonder if, that tells me he probably does know more details and is just not able to put it out there as confirmation yet. So I can say for sure that, at least in my own opinion, that I think at the very least there's going to be conversations around Binnington, and it could happen. I mean, speaking of conversations, we have an interview as well with Barry Trotz, the GM of the Nashville Predators, with New Jersey media talking about the potential, all the rumors around the Devils and Preds having had conversations around the deadline about a goalie trade. We know that there was talks between the Devils and Flames, and there's no doubt Tom Fitzgerald was kind of goalie hunting, if you will, looking at big names. Not only was he talking to the Flames about Jacob Markstrom and came close to making that happen, but this interview with Barry Trotz confirms 100% that there was talks between the Devils and the Preds around UC Saros as well. And essentially these two GMs know each other very well, and clearly a lot of respect for each other. He basically said that the talks didn't get too far, that there was an inquiry. He kind of gave a framework of what it would have to be involved for him to consider it, and it didn't sound like New Jersey was prepared to go there. So, they had talks, they were preliminary, and basically the Devils didn't love the asking price, so they kind of shied away. It probably went more towards Markstrom. Well, obviously at this point in time, he says that he wouldn't be surprised if they resume those talks. So could the Devils turn their attention to Saros, who I think is the younger, better option for any team that's looking for that top goaltender, whether it be New Jersey or, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit to some extent, rumored to be in that mix, and others too. If Saros can be had for the right price, to me, I'd take him over Markstrom any day, just given the age alone. But speaking of the other goalie here, and Jacob Markstrom, there's reports from Detroit beat writer Max Bultman in a mailbag type article suggesting that the Red Wings could very well be in the goalie market this year as well, talking about how obviously Ville Husso would have to be moved, hasn't really worked out the greatest. Alex Lyon's been pretty good, but he's signed next year pretty cheap, only under $1 million. Reimer's a pending UFA. They don't have to bring him back. Maybe they go bigger game hunting here and bring in a guy like Jacob Markstrom from Calgary. I mean, if Detroit can get into the playoffs, and at the very least we know they're going to be really close, that might entice a player like Markstrom, who would have to waive a no move, to say, you know what, they're a team on the rise, I see good things happening, I would go there. What that offer could be to Calgary, it's difficult to say. They do have a lot of young talent, though, that might intrigue the Flames. I know Jonathan Berggren's been a name that's been rumored to be available for some time. Maybe they have some picks in there. There's other prospects, too. So it's hard to say exactly what would be involved. But does it make sense for Detroit to go after a guy like Markstrom? I mean, really, if you look at their goaltending situation, I don't know that's the decor might be more of a pressing need, in my opinion, but at the end of the day, they have things that they need to address here. I'm not really sure about bringing Reimer back. I mean, maybe, but do you need two aging goaltenders? If you can get Markstrom, who's a much more higher quality aging goaltender, you could run with Markstrom and Lyon. You don't have to get rid of Lyon, and then you could, if you can find a way to move Husso. I don't know if Calgary would be interested there. Maybe not, I'm guessing. But they might have to find somewhere else. But at the end of the day, Detroit, look how far they've come this year. And they don't have elite level goaltending. If they can get an upgrade there, that could be a huge stepping stone for them to take things to another level as well. So I think the goalie market is going to be extremely busy. And we're going to see lots of movement. So whether it be Markstrom, whether it be Saros, whether it be Binnington, let me know your thoughts on all these guys. And is Crosby going to stay in Pittsburgh, or is, there a chance he could ask out and end up on a different team? before, whether it be his contract's up or before his career's up. Let me know your thoughts on that as well. Like I said, stay tuned for another video coming in the very near future regarding all the news here regarding expansion and the Coyotes' potential relocation. All that and more on the next video. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you're new, stick around, and I'll catch you next time.